Very well. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what part of the world that you're signing in from. We are thrilled because we have with us three of the titans of the corporate world from Pakistan, some of the bigger names that we've had the pleasure and privilege of having on our webinar series. Thank you. One second. Let me turn this off. Very well. Thank you so much for being with us. We have Raza Pirbhai from KFC, Samar Hayat from Tapal, and we have Amir Ibrahim from Jazz Mobilink. Thank you so much for being with us. Gentlemen, busy times, interesting times. Just curious to ask you, I'm sure you were sitting somewhere in your offices 3 to 4 months ago, looking at your balance sheets, looking at business projections, and thinking this is fantastic, everything's going to be okay, and then boom, our lives changed as we know them. No travel and just other restrictions that you must have faced. Maybe I'll go around the horn. I'll start with Amir, Samar, and then Raza, and I'll work backwards on the way back. Then Amir, just want to hear from you. 3-4 months ago, you're sitting pretty, and all of a sudden this happens. Just curious, what was the emotional feelings? How did you manage? What happened?
Thank you. Thank you for having me over here. Actually, sometimes when you do these jobs, you're never really sitting pretty. If it's not this crisis, it must be some other crisis, whether it's market competitive forces or it is something else. So, but certainly what we've gone through in the last 3 months is something that none of us have been quite prepared for, whether it was in our careers or whether it was in the business schools or executive education courses. Yes, we have come to deal with our own crisis management issues, but I think what we're going through right now is a perfect storm. So nobody anticipated this thing, and like we've had pandemics in the past, and they were out there either in a localized geography somewhere far away from Pakistan, or if there are crises here in Pakistan, then they are kind of manageable in a different context and manner. What we're going through right now and what we started going through about 3 months ago was unprecedented in many different ways. We just didn't know how long it's going to last, what the repercussions are going to be. It started off as a health scare, and then soon it transcended into a livelihood issue. And what we're going through right now and beginning to see in certain parts of the world is how a small trigger can make it into a law and order situation. And I think what we still have to see is the impact of it on a mental health dimension.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So, like initially, I think we all were looking at it from a health scare and whether our health systems are prepared. And then many companies, ourselves included, had to very quickly pivot in terms of providing business continuity. And telecoms and internet, by virtue of being telecoms and internet, got classified as essential services very early on. But we had to provide continuity of our services to millions of people here in Pakistan who rely on this thing for information, for connectivity, for comfort. So we've had an interesting journey, but we, being slightly more digital, were perhaps a little bit more prepared in terms of managing this business remotely compared to some of the other peers.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Amir. So Samar, I'd just love to bring you on. Obviously, people assume, tea, that's one business that can't be impacted. But I remember in one of your calls that I heard that I think there was a message that you gave out to your staff and employees as well. I think not only were you impacted, but you guys were making proactive plans. I think you made a comment that as blue collar workers, nobody, because of coronavirus, we won't touch any of those jobs and stuff. I just wondered 3 to 4 months ago, how did you handle that immediate bad news that you must have started getting from everywhere?
Yeah, no, I think Amir said it right, which is, this job sometimes goes from challenging to very challenging, but I don't know if it goes any better than that, and especially in Pakistan at times. So we've had a few crisis periods recently, devaluations, some retailer registration issues across Pakistan, etc. So there have been the fiscal year for us was anyway fairly challenging. And then, yes, of course, there's once in a lifetime pandemic.
We hope.
Showed up.
We hope.
Yeah,
we hope.
Yeah, I hope so. So it showed up, and I think the first thing that we did, like a lot of other companies did, is of course look at the safety and well-being of our employees, because the employees are the company is the employees. So the first step was to make sure that we are doing all the right steps to protect from a health point of view and from a well-being and safety point of view all our different sites across Pakistan, and making sure we at least are not vulnerable, at our sites. But then right after that, of course, came the second part, which is the business continuity part. So we have to make sure the employees are protected and all the sites are safe, and we are also under essential services because of food and beverages. So making sure that the production is running and we are still being able to supply uninterrupted to the consumers that want our products. But then on top of that, also have to make sure that all the other contingencies on the business are in place in case it gets worse. So to answer your question specifically, me and the leadership team of the company is basically set about prioritizing what we were going to focus on. It was well-being and safety of employees, cash protection for the company, because we didn't know where this thing would go from a fiscal standpoint. And then also thirdly is to make sure business continuity. And when it helps to have a clear list of priorities, because then you don't get distracted by all the noise. And trust me, I mean, there was a lot of noise, as you guys know, on this the first at least 3 weeks with all the lockdown, lockdowns coming into place, general uncertainty and fear. So I felt very strongly, and that's why I put a message out there also that you were referring to, that there was so much noise coming at us that it was very easy to get totally distracted from what we were actually supposed to focus on. So what we did was just try to focus on those things.
Interesting, Samar, you say that, right? So the communication, obviously, from the very top, critical. It's part of our Gadlang Management Consultancy webinars that we do. I had the opportunity to chat with Dubai Airport CEO at one point, and he was talking about Paul Griffiths, and he was talking about how he goes, I can sit in my senior leadership team and say, guys, we're going to be 2 weeks late to deliver a concourse, and by the time it goes down to the baggage handler, they think Dubai Airport is shutting down, right? So just bad news cascades, and that broken telephone and Chinese whisper and so on. Bad news travels. Raza, I'd love to bring you in. The huggy, feely, touchy, Care Bear Smurf side of your management of people. People always talk about the fantastic culture you have built with your team at KFC. Just curious, were you 3 months ago thinking, like Samar and Amir mentioned, is kind of the health and well-being first, or was it, pressure right away to manage the supply chain, logistics, all of that? Maybe just love to hear from you. You're on mute, Raza. Just unmute yourself.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Thanks for having me, Umar, and thanks to the other two colleagues. I guess most of what they've said is something what we also did. When we were hit with this crisis, it was a little different from their scenarios because we were into a food business, and our entire industry has been hit the most, right? So during that situation, what do you really do? And when we got the news that this is coming in, so to be honest, the initial was denial for the very first week, that it's not going to come to us, it's going to stay away, it's not going to happen, this, and then it came in. It came in as a storm and hit us hard because of the lockdown. Our operations were completely shut. We went down to completely zero. So what do you really do in that kind of a scenario? I think what we did was, and what has really helped us, to be honest, communication has really been the key in that how clear you are, how clearly you're communicating to your people as well, and how often. Hello, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
And how often you're communicating to your people. We are geographically spread it, so because we're all over Pakistan with around 95 stores. So how do you really kind of keep everyone engaged together? And how do you give a very clear message? How do you kind of give the message of safety? We went into a crisis which was phenomenal. Why I tell you is that we had to revise our entire standards within a week. Now, if you're spread it in 95 places and you have to revise the standards within a week, and that is, I'm talking about the food safety and all and everything, we had to really quickly respond. Now, how do you respond in that situation? Communication was key one that I shared with you. You had to be very, you had to be communicating well with your team. The second was, which was also really important, is that how much clarity do you give to your people? I think if you give clutter kind of messages, what is really the priority at the organization and what is the leadership? Sorry. So what were the two things that we said that we're going to focus? And we were very clear when it came in and we announced and I shared with my team that the two most important things are going to be for the organization is going to be brand protection and people. These are the only two things which we will focus in the next 3 months. And based on that, we revised all our standards. We revised our standards for brand protection for consumers, that what needs to be done, because we had to ensure all the food safety and health standards for consumer and all the standards for our people as well. So there were various different, and I tell you, when I say about restaurant operations, it has thousands of standards. So when you have to revise and redo that with 95 stores spread it, it's a huge challenge. So we had to do that, but we had to quickly respond. Then what happened was that business went down to zero completely. So the shutdown started to happen and the business went down to completely zero. We were being closed all over Pakistan. The challenge is that what we really faced was that we had to go and explain to the government that delivery is the safest operation, that at least allow us to operate delivery. Because globally, even in Wuhan, delivery was not being closed. So we went and we were able to convince some part of the government, which was Punjab and North. In Sindh, we still struggle because they don't seem to understand that delivery is a safe operations. They still feel opening up a shop or a retail shop is still much more safer than a delivery. But that's the challenges that you face with Pakistan. But coming back to the crisis, what we got hit with, I think 2-3 most important things were: how do you communicate? How do you give clarity to? How do you clarify and give 2 or 3 priorities, because you can't really prioritize a lot of things also.
I'm gonna come back to that, Raza, because I'm gonna ask you to pick it up exactly where you left it off in terms of what are you doing now. Let me just circle back around. Let me bring Amir back into the conversation. Obviously, these typical MBA curriculums, right, Amir? So, the kind of strategic thinking, the visionary next 3 to 5 year plans that I'm sure you guys have drawn out and you've worked with. I'm just curious, from a people perspective, from a right brain perspective, as we call it, from a transformational leadership perspective, Amir, do you find yourself now, as we've not had some great news coming out of Pakistan in the past few days in terms of the number of cases and so on. Inshallah, we hope those cases, obviously the trend dies down. Do you find yourself at times stressed out, and you find yourself at times having to give motivation, energy, enthusiasm, and passion even when you don't have it yourself? Is that something you work around?
Well, see, one of the definitions of leadership, if you go by what Bonaparte said many, many years ago, was the leader is a dealer in hope. So sometimes your job is to give hope when you don't have hope yourself. But quite honestly, I don't think that we are in such a hopeless situation. Yes, it is unprecedented. It is dark and gloomy. There are going to be silver linings. We just have to be patient, persistent, and I think realistic, not just optimistic, foolishly optimistic, but I think we have to create some opportunities out of this crisis. As they say, a crisis is a bad thing to waste. So you got to look at what can you learn from it. And, Raza was just talking about delivery. I think from a Pakistani context, it has accentuated the need for us to accelerate our digital infrastructure. Online deliveries, online shopping, these kind of things. Even our ability to track, trace, and quarantine would have been much better had we been a slightly more advanced country when it came to digital infrastructure. And that's the reason, the reason why I'm talking about is because that's the industry that I'm dealing with. But when we talk about in future have and have nots, those lines are going to be drawn around whether a person had internet and a smartphone and whether they did not. Of course, they will still consume tea and have burgers and everything else. But as a country, if we have to think about did we learn anything from this crisis? Is there a silver opportunity? Is there something that gets me excited to jump out of bed and motivate people, at least to my own colleagues in my own industry and my own organization? I told them that, guys, listen, look around you. Okay, I know that it may not really hold same water for KFC, but I said, look around you. There are businesses which are actually coming down to zero revenue. And, like, we have to be grateful that we are working in a telecom. Now, again, as a Pakistani leader, I can't really say that because there are many industries which have been shut down. But at least in the context of telecom and internet, it was slightly easier for me to keep people motivated. Or let me just put it this way, that it was slightly less challenging compared to KFCs or McDonald's or anybody else. Their challenges, or those in travel, their challenges were a lot more stark. So in that context, I was slightly blessed being in the business that I was. But certainly, this is one example. Coming back to leadership in crisis, I think I cannot emphasize more with the need of communication. And there are two or three pillars of communication. In crisis like this, I think one of the most important criteria for communication is that it's got to be frequent. Of course, you want it to be authentic and you want it to be honest, but at bare minimum, you want it to be frequent, because with that frequency, there will be some kind of a feedback mechanism that will come back to you. And they will either tell you that you are full of, whatever hot smoke, or I'm not getting the thing. So as long as you have a frequent mechanism of communicating with and by communicating, I don't mean giving speeches.
Both ways.
I mean communicating. I mean listening with empathy and understanding where they are. And we as an organization, we went on a forced lockdown 1 week before the government announced it, or maybe 10 days before the government announced it. So we went on to communicating with our employees. I do that every week with my leadership team, and also with the 3,000 people that we have. And this has been one of the most not only rewarding thing for me, but also one of the things that the employees give me feedback on, that this is what has kept them kind of hooked and excited and motivated during these times.
Amir, fantastic, right? So we say an optimist obviously finds the opportunity in every difficulty. A pessimist finds the difficulty in every opportunity. It's interesting, right? We in our leadership courses that we teach, we used to teach them face to face, but obviously we're doing these webinars now. I think I must have done around 100 now in the past 2.5, 3 months. And one thing that keeps coming up is this change management, that typical kind of Cotter model of establishing a sense of urgency, building a guiding coalition, creating a change vision, and then communicating that change vision, which was point number 4, and then creating broad-based action, and then celebrating the success and generating short-term wins, that kind of change management model. So I'm just interested to ask you one question. Amir said about this idea of purpose. So in his world, the digital kind of transformation, that virtual cliff that people spoke about, that eventually we're going to have to go digital, and then boom, here we are, we've got no choice. Do you find in your business that your staff, your management team, people, your stakeholders, there's a bit of resistance to change, that they almost want to just kind of keep doing what they're doing and hopefully this thing will go away? Or do you find that when you're talking to people and saying, look, guys, we have to change the way we work, we have to change our profit margins, all that kind of thing, that they're more open to that? So how are you finding that change management piece?
Yeah, I think firstly, I think this thing about a crisis kind of shapes things, and you ideally don't want to waste it. You want to learn from it and use it to accelerate the things that you wanted to shape anyway in a certain direction. So I think in that way, no, I think I've found by and large, I mean, even before the crisis, I found frankly quite a bit of good, fast-paced acceptance to what needs to get better. I mean, I generally avoid change for the sake of change, and there's a lot of talk about change. But I mean, sometimes people get very excited about change as an objective, right? Change is not an objective. Change is just a process to get to the objective. And if the process is needed to be used, then you use it. And similarly, at these times, this crisis has helped drive a lot of the things that we wanted to drive even before, but it has now helped drive them faster. And I think Amir referred to the whole digitization piece, the whole delivery piece, etc., that we were talking about earlier in the restaurant business. So I think in that way, it's been it's a tough crisis because there is not just a business impact, it's also a health and well-being impact. Generally, you deal with a business challenge or you deal with some kind of a medical challenge, but you normally don't deal with both together globally, everywhere, on every industry, right? So in that way, it's been incredible. But it's also going to do the things that Amir was talking about, faster digitization, etc. It's also going to help some of the people drive some of the change agendas that they wanted anyway faster. And it's also going to build tremendous resilience, because I'm personally, and this is just my point of view, but I'm personally 100% sure that we will, and by we I mean even Pakistan, but at least my company and that I'm currently a part of, and larger corporate industry, etc. Everybody will come out of this for sure more resilient and stronger, because when we're out of this, we'll look back and we'll see all the things that led to the process that we used to come out of it stronger, and we'll use that for times and times to come. So I'm actually quite bullish, inshallah, about where this will go.
You guys sound a lot more chirpier than some of the conversations we were having in the UAE, in the GCC, where it seems like obviously based in Dubai here, it's just doom and gloom. But great to hear, and I guess that's why you guys are having the results and doing as well as you are. You obviously, and it's just authentic, right? And then Samar, Amir, and Raza, that's when you guys are speaking, that's what comes out, that authenticity and belief. I guess you can't give to others what you don't have yourself, and it's just so nice that's coming out. By the way, we've got hundreds of people now on YouTube, and there's some questions coming through. My apologies, these questions, I'll try to take as many as possible, and we'll ask our CEOs here. As I want to ask you a question though, from a culture perspective, from the ability to do actual activities. I know your organization started doing a lot of these webinars and these kind of weekly conversations and engaging people on the wellness piece. Really liked what Amir and Samar and you said about there was the health crisis. Maybe it's going to become an economic crisis. We're living through it now. And then there's going to be the whole mental wellness piece that we haven't even spoken about, burnout, and haven't even spoken about all those things. But curious, Raza, maybe a couple of examples of culture. What are you guys doing right now around culture to kind of manage this scenario?
Yes, Umar. So let me give you a little bit of so I'll go from a little background on. So if you've set the organization right, if the nucleus of the organization is set on the right culture, I have been saying in my organization that which organization would actually come out and win in this crisis? Yes. Those who have set the right culture, and B, those who actually have the right leaderships in place, and the leaders who can actually, because this is the time where the leadership is going to be tested. In past, you've had different kind of crises and all and everything, but not the crisis of this. In this kind of a crisis, especially what we're seeing right now, what do you really kind of prioritize? Do you kind of prioritize health? Do you kind of prioritize economics? What do you really do with that? And you've got to really keep this parallel balance going on, because especially in a business like ours, where people are exposed. Rest of the two colleagues, they don't really have their people right. They're not really that much exposed to this virus. Like our people who are working in the front line, they're exposed to this. So how are you going to kind of balance this out, that you're going to give more weightage to economics or health, or how it's going to go? Like
profits or people,
profits or people and all. And then we were able to kind of clarify this, and we said very clearly in my communication, we have been saying this very clearly, that people first, customers and profitability will follow. That's what our slogan is right now, that people first, customers and profitability will follow. There are huge mental situations happening because their family has been going through it.
And Raza, this is not a cliche kind of thing, right? That you have, like, we keep getting these emails from everybody, right? We're with you. We support you, right? And then you ask them for anything, a bank or something, they're like, get out of here, right? So you're not just saying that.
So I'll tell you what we're actually, what we have been doing is that we're giving an equal weightage to both. So we are prioritizing that, we are actually doing in the organization. As I said, that I've been speaking, my leadership team has been speaking, we have been engaging various external, trainers, coaches and all, to kind of come in and help the well-being part of our people as well. How do you kind of get them out of this entire shock, trauma? How do they deal with this situation, the crisis situation, the crisis at home situation, the financial situation? So all this, we are actually speaking, and we have engaged, various different people who come in almost on a weekly basis and they talk. I think what really has worked, to be honest, I tell you, Umar, that what has really worked is that how do we, and I've been telling this to my team as well, that how do you really now work with the leadership shadow? You're not going to be there. How are you going to build that shadow? And you're going to give that support to people, and be it monetarily, because a lot of people, we have announced this, that anybody who's identified with COVID, there will be a COVID there's a relief that will be given to them and their family as well. If anybody who has personally got COVID, has contracted, or anybody in their family. So what I'm saying is, you can't just give them pep talks and good conversations, and I keep coming in and saying good things on this. To be concrete, tangible things also with attached to that, so that people did really get the trust of it. And with that all, we see some super fantastic stories coming in. The way people are going out and working, the way people are showing ownership, the way people are following. Because look, let me tell you, when we revised the standards, there wasn't really time to train people. Okay, when we revised the standard, it was just all it happened in a week. We couldn't really hold big seminars, classes, and all and everything. And we wanted people to adapt those changes immediately in their processes. So the way people did it, just because that we had built that, the organization in such a way where there was a huge level of trust, there was a huge level of compassion, empathy that was already there. And then they were really able to adapt to what we were saying. Very quickly, they were able to adapt to that.
Fantastic. So this is, I know we've had conversations as well where you've said you just can't, like, it doesn't happen overnight, right? You can fake it till you make it, but sooner or later people find out. So you just can't be operating a certain way, and then all of a sudden something happens and you say, here I am, this compassionate leader who wants to operate at the highest level of listening, which is empathy. I mean, you can't do it. By the way, on your YouTube channel, you guys must have a lot of fans, because we get so many nice things people are saying. Amir, you got some questions for you. I'm just going to park them for one more round. I have one more round of questions, and I'll take questions from our friends on YouTube. So Amir, I wanted to ask you, I know people development and development of leaders, the next line of leaders that, as I mentioned, kind of the shadow leadership. I know that's important to you. I know you already have some programs and leadership programs that you've put into place with your teams, with some of the universities and consultants around the world. I'm just curious now, we're sitting here in the middle of June. Cases seem to be going up in Pakistan. Maybe, hopefully, inshallah, this goes away soon. But if the trend continues, then maybe the economic side of things might just hit August, September, October. Just curious, Amir, 2 or 3 things. What are you guys doing to prepare yourself, your business? What are you doing to prepare your people? What does the next 6 months look like for Mobilink Jazz?
A good question and a tough one. But see, whether it was this challenge or some other challenge, most of the businesses constantly have to keep on looking at evolving landscape. And that requires them to keep on looking at both opportunities on how they're going to pivot themselves. So I don't think that this in itself is something that we're dealing for the first time in terms of repositioning ourselves, or how do you go from being a telecom company to being a technology company, or from technology to a data company. Those things are generally ongoing, or you find a better way of distributing your product, or you get into a adjacent business. So I think the good or bad thing of being in business is that you always have to be adaptable and agile, and those are the organizations that survive. We were talking about culture, and I think the culture, first of all, in a crisis, the culture just becomes more visible. I don't think you're going to create a completely new culture. If you were a bad employer, all of a sudden, you can perhaps become slightly less bad. But if you were just saying a lot of good things and you don't follow them up during this crisis, you will lose your brand equity very quickly. So the culture that we have tried to create over the last few years here at Jazz is that we want to be entrepreneurial and enterprising, and looking at opportunities and looking at better ways of servicing our customers, right? So we have moved from physical to digital, and now, there's a combination explanation thereof. So coming back to your question per itself, we're already looking at what does it mean for our evolving or the evolving needs of our customers. Are we going to go more digital? Does it become does it mean that we will perhaps not have any physical presence? And one of the things that we perhaps where I can relate with KFC in this particular case is that we had about 20 centers of our own, which we had to shut down. Because that would have required people to come into physical contact. And while we obviously kept everybody employed, one of the insecurities that kept on creeping onto the minds of those people is that, okay, I'm getting a job, but I'm not really employed per se. Is my job going to disappear if this thing continues for 5 or 6 months? And that's where you actually think about, okay, what else can this workforce do for me? So we had to very quickly come and give them alternative work that the organization needed to be done. We took all these computers from their offices and started parking them in their homes to give them, like everybody else had a laptop, but people who are in our service center are sitting behind a desktop. So it required for us to very quickly rejig the work because we wanted people to earn a livelihood, not just be employed. And I think if you didn't do that, I think there would be a growing sense of insecurity that, okay, fine, this is a great employer. They are a great employer for 2 months, but they're not going to be a great employer for 1 year, right? So that nervousness and mental stress would have come in. So from that context, like we have been able to, not only here in the last 3 months, but in our reformation journey that started almost about 5 years ago, we have constantly been educating people that sooner or later we will have to find new ways of doing the same things, or we will have to find new things to do. Otherwise, we will become a dinosaur. So I don't think as we go through this crisis or as we go out of this crisis, anybody's going to be massively shocked that this is something that Jazz did for the first time, because we've been kind of used to it.
It's a fantastic, again, great insights. I'm loving the comments coming on your on the YouTube feed. Look, Tony Robbins says, right, if you work the same way for 10 years, you haven't worked 10 years, you worked your first year 10 times. And that's the last thing we can afford, or anybody can afford. Over the past 13 years, I must have now delivered, I think, to over 55,000 people, training workshops and so on. And the one thing that keeps coming back again and again, and Samar, I guess, perfect person to ask this question to from a leadership perspective. So there is that transactional leadership piece, right? The KPI, SMART objective, kind of performance-oriented, short-term, result-driven. And then there's this transformational leadership, which is the culture setting, empowerment, enablement, and so on. I'm curious, because I know you've had a fantastic experience working abroad for many, many years before you returned to Pakistan. Just curious, have you noticed in Pakistan that your ability to get people to think beyond the immediate, like I'm going to lose my job, things are going to, your ability to kind of inspire them and get them to stop thinking about the now, but the things they need to do 3 to 6 months down the road, has that been a challenge to go transactional to transformational? Just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think just, again, it keeps coming back to the same topic of culture and culture that you like to build, but then the culture happens because if you start going about saying, I'm going to go through, step number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to build a culture, it's sometimes turned into just talk, whereas culture ends up just happening to organizations because of a lot of other things that you're doing. When the crisis hit, one of the things we immediately did was, and one of the messages that I shared with everyone in the company was that we will make empathy, which was always part of our 4 core values of the company. We'll make that the most important thing we focus on. And as linked to that, there was a lockdown. There were a lot of ration bag distribution and creation that started in Pakistan. So we continued to donate to large organizations that were producing ration bags with our tea. But then for all of our factory workers, we started providing ration bags, and we said we made a commitment that as long as the lockdown lasts, we will continue doing that as many months as it takes. Along with that, I also made a commitment to the team and to the company that we will, for our factory workers, we will ensure job security, right? And then I got a message immediately from one of my colleagues outside the company who asked me, you made the statement, but what if this thing lasts a year? What if this thing lasts 6 months, 9 months, right? I mean, now that you've said this, you're going to be held accountable to it, and maybe you shouldn't have said it.
Yeah, it's on social media. We all saw it.
Yeah, and I kind of WhatsApp back to this person, and I said, to be very honest, in the 70-year history of a company, what is 6 months? And what is 9 months? So similarly, back to your point about long term and getting people to think longer term, it is for sure the biggest crisis, but it's not the first crisis, right? And this will be over, and there will be God knows what else coming down the road. So the idea is to make sure that we obviously, like you mentioned earlier, we have a 3-year strategic plan that's aligned with our shareholders who are brilliantly supportive, by the way, of everything that we've been doing in the company. And now we went back and we updated it, tweaked it slightly to include all the elements of what we want to do in this crisis mindset, also in terms of giving support to all our employees and all our other stakeholders like our distributors and our supplier partners. So we've already built that in to our thinking, and when you go through that process of building that in, there are a lot of training happens for a lot of the people in the company. So it kind of all starts fitting together. That's how we're looking at it.
Fantastic. Look, if I was an employee of either one of your 3 companies, I'd feel very reassured right now, right? Just some of the things you guys are saying, I'm in good hands right now. There's a final question from my side to you, and then I'm going to open it up to a few questions, and then I promise we'll let you get back to work, because I do know you do have, slightly busy schedules. So I'll let you get back to that. There's a final question to you. Next 6 months, this idea of survival, at some point we'll need to move on to thriving, right? You just can't keep surviving forever, right? You can't stay in this mindset that you're just going to deal with every situation as it happens. Eventually we'll have to move on to thriving. I'm just curious, within KFC, what are some of your ideas? How long do you think it'll take for us to get to this new normal, or is there going to be there's this fantastic article I was reading about the normalcy bias of how sometimes human beings, we think things must go back to normal. We have this normalcy bias. It very well might not be. So what do you think the next 6 months look like for yourself and KFC?
Yeah, Umar, what we think, because our industry is most impacted, and what we see that what the new normal is going to be. So there are various scenarios we are working on, that what this new normal is going to look like in a restaurant come retail industry, especially in a restaurant industry, because what we feel that dine-in is really going to struggle for the next. We don't see the dine-in, for in next 3 to 6 months. So how are we going to really survive without one complete piece of channel, which was really a good proportion of channel in Pakistan, especially? Yes, rest of the globe where delivery and all other channels are really super, larger. But Pakistan still is a very dine-in market. So if dine-in is going to shift and it's not going to be there, how it's going to look like in the next 6, 8, 10 months? And what are we going to do about it? As Amir initially, he said that with all these crises, there comes opportunity as well. So there is a big opportunity, and I'm really, it's good as well that KFC was well prepared of it much before this crisis also, because we have a very strong footprint in delivery. We already have that. All what we want to do is that we want to make it more technology enabled. We are, but there were complacencies. Now what has happened is, in this crisis, when you get into the crisis, you got to collaborate in crisis, and you come up with ideas very quickly. And something that we were kind of aiming, or our ambitions were for 2-3 years, that we would enable a technology in 2-3 years, what perhaps we will be doing it right now. Those ideas are coming in, we are locking up those ideas, we're investing on those ideas, and we got to move on with it. Because what we feel is that consumer behavior is going to change. There will be more delivery, definitely. There will be takeaway also, but a different kind of takeaway. The pickup, which we see as a click and collect. That's the new kind of a takeaway that's going to be. So what we're doing is that we are enabling technology and investing into technology, and trying to work and come around with different ideas that how really can we work with the other 2-3 alternate channels that we already have, but we need to strengthen, amplify, and make it more technology enabled. So that's where we're investing. That's where the ideas are going in. So in innovation and technology, I think that's where the two P's that we see that this next 6 months,
Excellent.
we're actually going to be focusing there.
Excellent. And then I guess that's a perfect segue into so here's what I want to do, gents. If you allow me, I want to push my luck, get 2 questions in, 2 questions per person from the questions. We're going to push my luck. So we're going to do this a bit rapid fire, 30 seconds. I give you the floor. And, then I'm going to get you to share your input on this. So let me put Samar on the spot right away. Samar, 30 seconds, 2 or 3 big qualities. If you're sitting right now listening to you guys, I'm sitting at home, I've just graduated, I'm looking for a job, or God forbid, I've lost my job. 2 or 3 qualities, characteristics, skills that you'd recommend I should be picking up right now. Floor is yours, sir.
Adaptability. I think it doesn't necessarily mean that if you graduated or if you were working in a certain area, that has to be the only area that you now must keep either looking for jobs or must keep continuing in. This is this is the time to adapt, if there was ever a time to adapt. So I'm going to refer to it, which is the jobs we do. Are they going to remain the jobs we do, or are they, or are we? So there is this whole dynamic of will the job change, and do you change it yourself? So I think it'll be very, very key for anybody out there to focus on adaptability. I would pick that. I think I ran out of my 30 seconds.
No worries. Fantastic. No pressure. For sure. Let me come around, Amir, to yourself. If I was a CEO, or if I'm a senior manager of an organization, I've got a team to run. Couple of advice. What advice would you give a CEO, small company, 15, 20, 100 people, business been impacted, uncertainty in the future? You're Monday morning or Sunday in the UAE, you're running a meeting, couple of advice. What would you say to your team?
So I think everybody looks up for direction, and that's why tone at the top and your body language and your own level of excitement is so important, right? And I alluded to it earlier also, that a leader is a dealer in hope. If you do not have the energy, no matter what you say, your team is not going to see this energy. So, and I know that you talked about fake it till you make it. I don't care how you do it, but one of your jobs is to actually energize and enthuse the people who work with you. Your strength comes from what they deliver. And your job when you're on the stage is to energize them. Of course, the more authentically you do it, the better it is. But if your body language, if your non-verbal communication does not reflect that, it's going to be very difficult for the 10 people, whether it's 3 people, whether it's 10 or 1,000, whether it's your own household. It doesn't even have to be a corporate environment. So in any leadership position, the way that you conduct yourself has to have an element of positivity.
Love it. So adaptability, positivity, and picking up some great things here. Raza, perfect question for you, because people want to know how you still manage to look like you're 20 years old. So a perfect question to you is, from a wellness perspective, from a stress management perspective, couple of ideas, Raza, 30 seconds, what would you do? What do you do to kind of keep your head above the mess?
Run. I do running. Cycling, running.
You run away from something.
Run, so do a bit of physical. I think that's really important. That's to me. I think that's really important. Do a bit of physical. That is going to help. Read if people like to read, they can read. Now there's so much of information. They can just get on your webinars and then listen to the webinars, and perhaps that can be a
this is not a setup, by the way. If you're listening, this is not a setup. This is not a cheap advertisement for
any webinars, not just us, but anything. Read, run, do physical, learn. And most importantly, you asked to Amir as well, that in a Monday morning meeting, what typically can you help with? Show love, be authentic, show empathy to people, because I think that's what is really required in the corporate world, which is really missing. Corporate have been shying away from showing love because that has been seen as something which is weak, soft, perhaps might not work. There's a very terminology, normal terminology we use, danda works. No, it's not danda. Show love, be authentic. Galvanize, as Amir said, galvanize people, energize people, motivate them, and be authentic to people. I think that will help. That will work.
So adaptability, this idea of positivity, and then obviously stay fit if you want to look like Raza. So look, one more round. I promise one more round, and then we'll release you into society and see what happens, because the amount of positivity and energy you gentlemen exude is something to be bottled up. Amir, let me ask you then, in this spirit of agility, right? So people often all these corporate bingo buzzwords, right? And I'm sure over the years you guys have heard in your boardrooms, right? You're sitting on you're not focused. Somebody asks you a question, you say, yeah, we should be more strategic. What does that mean? No idea. Should be more agile. What does that mean? No idea. I'm just curious. Some of these things became buzzwords: agility and strategic thinking and visionary leadership. I'm just curious. One thing, Amir, parting thoughts. If this thing, God forbid, continues for 6 months, a year, resilience. Love to hear from you. How do you stay resilient? How do you kind of keep believing that at some point the clouds will part and the sun will shine and the birds will sing and life will be better? Just curious, in your years and years of experience in going through tough times, how have you managed to stay emotionally resilient?
I think it all goes back to the positivity, right? So I've got this 3P, PPP. It's got nothing to do with political party PPP, but first of all, perspective is really important, right? You have to contextualize what you're going through. You have to recognize that every issue is not a crisis. It's really painful when you're going through it, but it will pass, right? You also need patience, right? Careers, businesses, it's not just a weekly sales number that you hit or a quarterly target. If you want to be in the positions that three of us have been fortunate to be in, you have to stand quarter after quarter. So, just be patient. It's not a swan song that makes the summer or whatever. And the last thing is persistence or perseverance. So you got to keep on hammering at it. And those are, I think, the three elements that then eventually contribute to resilience. So recapping, perspective. Don't forget about this thing, it is probably, the main thing is, how are you going to look back at it 6 months from now, right? And I read a lot of stories about people graduating and they're saying, well, we didn't really have a real graduation. Or those who are starting school, universities, they're going to be shortchanged, or those who were waiting to get their first jobs. But, maybe 4 years from today, this is going to be a massive snowstorm. We look back at it and say, listen, I survived that thing. So focus on what's really important. That's the perspective thing, right? You will eventually get out of it.
Fantastic. Let me just add a P and bring in Summer. The P would be purpose. So we always talk about that, the janitor at NASA, right? So cleaning the floor. So what are you doing here? I'm sending a man to the moon, right? So they've got that amount of purpose. They believe that their organization is headed in the right direction and they buy into that vision. I'm just curious, Samar, to ask you, in the next 6 months, 1 year, God forbid, this thing becomes a longer drawn out thing. Just curious, is that something that you'll consider, giving your people purpose and getting them to buy into something bigger than their KPIs or their salary or their paychecks? Maybe 30 seconds, your parting thoughts, and if this thing goes on for a long time, what do we do?
Well, we'll fight it, and we'll fight through that as well. So just like these last 3 months haven't been easy at all. If, God forbid, this is a longer journey, of trials, then we'll go through that too, and then we'll come out of that too, because it's very, very obvious that this famous every crisis is like a U. When you're at the bottom of the U, right, it's or a V, or whatever you want to call it. When you're at the very bottom, right, it seems very painful, but there is a passing of that time, and so if we, God forbid, have to deal with it for longer, we will deal with it based on the same fundamentals that we've been dealing with it on the past 3 months. We will continue to keep the employee well-being and safety as our number one priority. We will continue to ensure business continuity. We will continue to act with empathy and care for everyone that's around us, and for our distributors, our partners, and then we will, and as we do that, the last piece I will say, which we've been talking about a lot in the office as well, which is, the word team is like a cliched one as well, like so many other things. Frankly, in a company or in a large business, when somebody is not doing their best at their job, for sure they are letting somebody else down that's counting on that effort, right? Because that is how it's like the goalkeeper who keeps getting, letting sloppy goals through. No matter what the forwards are doing, your team is still going to lose. So everybody's got to do their part in this to help the others through it. And this is a big kind of spirit we're trying to infuse a lot these days in what we do, which is you bring to your work the best that you can do, and because there are others counting on it.
Strong inspirational leadership there. And look, again, final words to Raza, but so much of what you've said resonates. We've got comments coming in. My apologies to everyone who's answered your questions I just possibly cannot get in. Adaptability, positivity, love, persistence, purpose, patience. Love some of the comments we've had. Raza, final thoughts to you, and then if you allow me to wrap up. Raza, just curious, from a people perspective, you spoke so eloquently, and I know you believe in this stuff. You're not just saying it because it's just the right thing to say. You're saying it because it's the real thing to say, which is this kind of positivity, people, wellness, this piece. I'm just curious, if this thing goes on for 6 months to 1 year, do you believe you guys have enough gas in the tank? The senior management team is there a plan in place that if it's not a sprint, it's a marathon? Like Summer said, we'll fight until fight, and sooner or later we'll come out of this. The floor is yours. Final thoughts.
So I don't want this to continue, but I tell you, if this continues, what will really happen? And the way I see it, you can definitely garbage my thoughts if you don't really go with that. But what I feel is, if it's going to continue, the humans will be resetting their overall emotional balance also. So what will really happen is, we will be more resilient, we'll be much more stronger, there'll be much more love, there'll be much more, even the corporates will have to show much more love. So their entire human mechanism will have to be resetted. Yeah. And I tell you, I don't know, but I believe in this, that perhaps this is a God call, where he wants us to reset that. We have become so transactional in corporates that we really, perhaps God is forcing us to reset ourselves. He wants us to look at people, more from empathy, more from compassion, more from the grounds of human that they are with you, right? So if this thing continues, I think those organizations will survive who are not really very transactional with their people, who will actually show more empathy, compassion, and love, because that's what is really required. And the trust is required in the organization and from the people as well. So that's how only we can actually survive and come out of it. So transactional will fail. Love, emotions, and all that will actually take us out of it. So no matter, even if it's prolonged, if you have that, you're going to make it.
Fantastic. Raza, thank you for that. For all of the KFC people who are listening, please make sure you record this. And the next time, Raza yells at you or something, you can play this back to him and say, where's the love? Look, Raza, Amir, Samar, fantastic hour. I hope others have learned as much from you as I have. If you allow me to just give a 60-second summary, because then, we were able to contextualize this. I started by asking you, how did you deal with that pandemic crisis, bad news, and from what I heard, you said, look, it's not our first rodeo. It's not the first time we've been through this, and this too shall pass. Then when I asked you to talk about some of the things you're doing now, one thing that resonated in all three messages was people and compassion and empathy, and the ability to just put profits before people. What comes first? Do good people bring you profits, or do profits bring you good people? So I just feel, listening to you, that you guys definitely in your organizations have figured that out. And then I asked you what the next 6 months to 1 year looks like. And I think that ability to stay positive and persistent and patient, and to give a positivity and have adaptability, some of those kind of key skills. So if you're a young person or an experienced person who's worried, nervous, right, about what doom and gloom you hear around you, what Stephen Covey referred to as the locus of control, right? You can only focus on things which are in your area of control as opposed to your area of influence or area of concern. Can you control coronavirus? You can't, obviously, right? But you can control what you do every day. You can control the enthusiasm and passion you bring to your teams, a smile in your face, a prayer in your heart, and then sooner or later, positivity becomes infectious. Positivity becomes contagious. If you're listening to this, let's start a new pandemic. Let's call it the positivity pandemic, where we share good news and positivity and not just constant negative news, which sometimes is the acronym for a very famous news channel, which seems to be doing very well, constant negative news. You want to avoid constant negative news, focus on positivity, and positivity shall come your way. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us on our series. For those of you who are listening to us, please subscribe. You know, I must say, I was never used to saying this 3 months ago, but I've found myself things like subscribe to our YouTube channel. But this is the way I guess the future is for us. Learning and development. We have a webinar series going on. We focus on leadership skills, softer skills like emotional intelligence and mindfulness. There are webinars we do regularly. We'll keep you notified. Amir Ibrahim, Jazz and Mobilink, Samar Hayat, Tapal T, Raza Pir Bhai, KFC. Thank you so much. We'll speak to you guys again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.